If you have more than a few cookbooks in your collection, you probably know the frustration of trying to remember which book has a favorite recipe. Well, today's guests work to solve that problem. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. I'm Molly Stevens, and today I am here with Kate Leahy. Hey, Kate.
Hey, Molly.
Kate, how many cookbooks do you have?
I don't know, because some of them I have in storage. Some of them are out, have limited shelf space. So they're stacked like on stacked, and it drives me nuts. And it makes me feel like one day I just want to have a really big bookshelf and I can have everything nice and neat and tidy.
Right.
Yeah.
Needless to say, you have a lot.
Yeah, more than the average bear.
Yeah. Yeah. I counted one point, and I don't know how many I have since then. And at one point, I had a similar situation and built a lot of shelves. My husband built me this beautiful cookbook library. But now I have stacks that aren't on those shelves. And so, it's a lot of books.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And I would love to do an episode on organizing your cookbook library, because I think that's a whole...
Do color, by author.
Right. But today we want to talk about finding a recipe. So, it's so easy to go online and search for recipes. But if you have this amazing cookbook library, or, even just 20 books or 30 books, there are recipes in those books. You bought those books for a reason. How do you find the recipe? I find myself pulling them out and flipping through them. And then I'm like, I swear it was in this book by blah, 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 and get frustrated and waste a lot of time.
Or you're flipping through a book and you don't realize it had this particular recipe that you're like, oh, if only I'd known about that, before, because that would have been really cool to make at Thanksgiving or whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes, some of the indexes in books aren't always super helpful. Like, it's like, there's a potato soup that I used to love, and I know it's in this book by, Julia Child, whoever. And I go in and it's not listed as potato soup. It's listed as like farmer's potage or something, like I'm never going to find that soup.
No,
right?
You're not looking up, what I really want today is farmer's potage, Well, the thing is, I wondered if cookbook indexes have become skimpier now that paper is more expensive, because I do have some older cookbooks and I feel like they were more granular with their indexes. Right. And now it's sort of like green beans. It'll only include recipes that have green beans in the title. But if you have green beans, other parts of the recipe that aren't in the title, it's not going to show up, which is kind of what if green beans were really an important part of a main course that you might have wanted to know about, but you're not going to find it in your index.
Right. Like my farmer's potage, it would be under potatoes too. So I would have found it. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, today we're talking to Jane Kelly and Jenny Harton, and these are two people who are working to help us keep track of our personal cookbook libraries through their website called Eat Your Books. Jane is the co-founder and CEO of Eat Your Books. Before that, she worked in the music and TV industry in the UK. She started a business selling online cookbooks back in the 90s. So she's been around cookbooks and business for a long time. And then Jenny Harton is the director of publicity and the indexing manager at Eat Your Books. And she's written cookbook reviews and features for various websites and other outlets. And she actually continues to write for Publishers Weekly. And some people may know her as the founder of the Cookbook Junkies Facebook group. Let's get to it. Jane and Jenny, welcome to Everything Cookbooks. We're so happy to have you here.
Delighted to be here.
It's exciting for us. This is our episode 99 of the podcast, if you can believe that. So we thought it would be very fitting to talk about cookbooks, like a lot of cookbooks, which is really what Eat Your Books is about. And we want to start back to the beginning, because especially for people who might not even know about Eat Your Books. But Jane, could you explain briefly, like when, why, how did it all begin? When did you start this?
This is Jane. I started it in 2007, where I had a lot of cookbooks on my bookshelves. I owned about 700 cookbooks at the time, and I had kids. I was, busy cooking for a family. And when I wanted to find a recipe quickly, I'd go online. And it used to annoy me, because I think I've got all these wonderful cookbooks, but it's just going to take me too long to pull down books and find a recipe for whatever I wanted to cook. And I thought, if I had a database of my cookbooks, of the recipes in my cookbooks, I'd use them rather than going online to find a recipe. And I had that light bulb moment of like, I'm not the only person who must have this issue. And you don't have to have 700 cookbooks to find it takes you too long to find exactly the recipe you want. So I thought, yeah, I think this is a business. And my background was in business. So it wasn't like a big thing for me to start a company. And my sister, Fiona, who is in New Zealand, I talked to her about it and she said, yeah, she was interested too. And so we started it together. So we spent 2 years building the website, populating it with enough data that we felt it was a decent level to launch. And we launched it in 2009. And since then, it's just gone from strength to strength.
700 cookbooks to start. I would love to ask you how many you have now, but it's probably even more than that. With 700 is a pretty...
Yeah, it's crazy. 3,500 I have now, which is,
wow.
I know.
Amazing.
I actually am really running out of space. I've got a large unfinished basement, which is lined with bookshelves. And so a lot are down there. And then I've got about 800 upstairs. And but I am now running out of space. So I really need to prune, but I just find it so hard to let any of them go.
Well, it's also just your proof that this service is so valuable, because it really is hard to go through. Sometimes I'll remember where I got a certain recipe and maybe I put a little sticky note in that page. But once you get to a certain number of books, that gets harder. And also sometimes you just forget, maybe it's a beloved book that you haven't looked at in a while. And if I'm using your site, if I understand it correctly, if I'm just searching for just how I would on the internet, but maybe I'm just looking at my cookbook library and just said, oh, I didn't realize I had all these amazing recipes for chicken thighs that I've just been neglecting. Yeah.
So it's not just finding recipes you've cooked before that you can't remember where they were. It's also discovering recipes you never would have discovered because they might be in a book that you just never would have looked in for that particular type of recipe, or it might just be that you just haven't used that book for a while. So it's just wonderful because you can search by so many different ways, ingredients or recipe type or special diet, lots of different ways that we've categorized the recipes. And then it will give you a list of all the recipes, what book it's in, what page it's on. And then you just pull that book down from the shelf or pull down several and compare them and see which one you want to make, or an amalgam of all of those recipes, however you want to do it. But it just means that you've suddenly got your cookbook collection opening up in a way that you just couldn't really do before.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I know a lot of people buy cookbooks and read them cover to cover, but a lot of us buy books at such a pace or, different times of our lives where we might not go through them cover to cover or have a deep familiarity for what's in them. And the other thing I think about is indexes. They don't all work the same way. And so say I'm looking for something and I'm just using the wrong search word. My sense is with Eat Your Books, I'm very curious how the index works. How does it work?
We have a lot more data than is in the back of the book index. The publishers, they give you a certain number of pages for the index at the back, and that can be fairly limited in some books' cases. Others are a little bit more comprehensive. But still, it's always going to be limited to the main ingredients or the main concepts of that recipe. So whereas Eat Your Books will go right down to the minutiae of like herbs and spices. So say you've got a bunch of dill and you bought dill for one recipe, but you've got the rest of the bunch, you're thinking, oh, I wonder what I've got that I could use dill in. You couldn't do that with a cookbook index because it wouldn't list the dill unless it was, a primary ingredient. Right. So on Eat Your Books, you can say, what recipes have I got that use dill? And then you're seeing all of your recipes. So, and then the other category tags that I mentioned, the special diet, the ethnicity, the recipe type, all those type of things often are not able to be categorized in the back of the book index because, again, space. So it's a really much more comprehensive way. But, apart from that, there's also speed because you're looking in all of your books at once rather than just looking in the back of the book index for one book.
Right.
I would love to know how Eat Your Books has changed since you initially came up with the idea and launched it. How has it sort of grown? Has the community told you things it wanted that you wouldn't have anticipated in 2009? What is different about it today?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely that's a big factor of members saying, I wish we could do X. And then, we've developed that. So initially, hence the name Eat Your Books, it really was about cookbooks. But we realized fairly quickly that people also wanted food magazines, that they subscribed to Bon Appetit or Food and Wine or some magazine that they would then keep those magazines, and they wanted to be able to find recipes in their magazines in the same way. So we added food magazines fairly quickly, actually, within a couple of years. And now we index all of the main food magazines around the world. And then we also realized that people often wanted online recipes. That's not really our primary focus. There's lots of ways to find online recipes. I mean, obviously the basic is Google, but there's other sites that index or have online recipes, but we still do carry those. So we've done quite a lot of newspaper columns where, there's really good authors like all the New York Times columns, those type of things. So we've also indexed sites from cookbook authors like Otto Lengi or Nigella Lawson. We've indexed those too. So the online side of it is never going to be our primary focus, but that has been something we've added. And members can index their own online recipes as well. If they see something they'd like to add, they can add that to the library and to their bookshelf as well. So that's how the sort of area has expanded over time. And then other features get added all the time that members request or we feel could be added.
Mm-hmm. How big is the community?
We don't really go into giving out individual numbers, but it's hundreds of thousands. It's all over the world.
Yeah.
About 45% in the US, and the rest then in declining priority is the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, all being the sort of English speaking, tend to like the same type of cookbooks, and usually a lot of the big names sell well in all of those countries. And then other English speaking countries like South Africa and countries in Europe where people speak English very well, like the Netherlands or Scandinavia, and then the whole of the rest of the world, because people do buy English language cookbooks regardless whether English is their primary language or not.
You mentioned popularity, and Kate and I were just wondering if from the back end, are you able to, based on what people are searching for, are you able to see like the popularity of a book or what recipes are the most popular? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, we do, because part of the community aspect of the site is that the members write their notes about cooking that recipe, which again is something you can't get anywhere else in the world, because this is people who are actually cooking from the recipes in the cookbook. So they then add their notes, they upload their photos of the dish that they cooked, which is really helpful.
It's super helpful. I love that aspect of it.
Yeah, because a lot of books, they're limited by budget on how many photos they can have. So this way you can actually see how the recipe looked when somebody cooked it. They add their ratings. And the notes are super helpful, because even though we know that reputable authors are going to test their recipes, it doesn't always happen. So the fact that we've got our members saying, oh, I found that although it said 45 minutes, it really needed to bake for an hour, or those type of things. Everyone's ovens are different, of course, but, so there's quite a lot of that really helpful notes. So yes, we're able to see from that, which are the recipes that we know have been cooked over and over and over by members because they've added their notes or their ratings or their photos. And you can rank your search results that way as well. You can say, I've searched for X, but I'd like to see which were the most popular recipes. And then you can rank them by that, and you can see at the top which ones most people rated.
That's really interesting, because one of the things that we talk on our podcast a lot about is how to write cookbooks. And I'm just thinking about, if I'm a aspiring cookbook author, what do you think are ways that I could use the site? I'm wondering, like, personally, I was thinking if I have a certain topic, I can use the search function to see how many recipes, say, on a certain topic are out there. And maybe I can find comparable books. So if I'm writing a proposal, it's like, my book is like this book meets this book. And it would be a great way to search for a lot of books that I might have not thought of off the bat. If you were writing a book, what are ways that you could use Eat Your Books to research sort of what's out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've actually heard from cookbook authors that they do use the site in two ways. One, to see what other people have done with ingredients or with a theme or subject, just to make sure you're not duplicating what they've done, but also maybe to trigger some ideas. And then also just to get some, sometimes some inspiration. You can see how other, and ways in which an ingredient has been used or on a topic. And then also, I know that other sites and magazines use our site to check that somebody who's submitting a recipe hasn't stolen it.
Oh.
So they'll look, search by the ingredients or the title or whatever, and just to check, because a lot of these sites, they've got freelance people submitting stuff, and they want to make sure it's not something they've taken from someone else.
I had
So
never,
interesting. Yeah.
but as a contributor as well, you could also, search if you're working on a recipe for a publication, a magazine, you could search and just make sure you're not duplicating it. Do the work
Yeah.
for the editor.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And we've indexed over 2.5 million recipes. So that's a lot of recipes.
How does
and
that
they're
even
all,
Yeah.
How does the indexing work? I mean, do you have a team of, I think I read you have 5 staff members?
Yeah, but we have a lot of freelance indexers. Jenny, who's going to be talking, I've sort of been dominating the talking so far because it's been about the history of the site, but
Right.
Jenny manages all the indexes. She manages all the cookbook reviews, and she's going to be talking about that side of the site. But Jenny manages them all, and we have about 15 of them around the world, and they're all freelance. And so Jenny assigns books to them that we want indexed, and then unfortunately, it's a manual process, which in some ways is good because it means that, we're very careful about the consistency of our data. So although it's an expensive way of doing it, it means that we know that our data is correct. I know that with AI, there may be people thinking, oh, you could just use AI to do it. We've tried and it never really works. There's so many mismatches when you're looking at ingredients or recipe types and so much, the information that we add, the category tags, isn't even on the recipe page. We just know that a book should be this and it should have that ethnicity and it should. So our indexes are all very experienced. And so, that's a manual process. And then the other good thing about it being a manual process is no one else has done it.
That's so true. Barrier to entry, very tricky.
Yeah, it's a big barrier to entry because no one else has been crazy enough to think this was a good idea to actually manually index that 2.5 million
over
recipes.
These years.
That's amazing. Yeah. So to be clear, to use this site, because I do use it here at home in my cookbook library, the user needs to take time to enter in their cookbooks. They do. Library. You can also use it beyond that, but I have to say it's an easy process. It feels a little daunting, but you just need to look right in the title and it pops right up. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It seems daunting initially, particularly if you own a lot of cookbooks, but actually it's not. But we are looking to improve that process either by. Well, you can do barcode scanning now, but we're looking to make that part of the phone, that you can actually barcode scan directly from your phone. Right, but we're also looking at ways to take a photo of your cookbook shelves and recognize from the spines what the books are and then import them that way. Unfortunately, that again isn't 100% because, people's spines may be a bit battered or not be so legible but anyway, we are looking at ways to try and make that, because that is a barrier for some people to getting started, is thinking, oh, it's going to take me so long to add my books. The books are all there. They're already in the EYB library is 170,000 books. So we've really got practically everything listed. We also add ways that members can add books that aren't in the library, and they can even add personal books or like community books that the local that definitely wouldn't be in our library. They can add those. So we make it easy for people.
But they won't be indexed. They won't. The recipes.
No, they won't be indexed. No,
they'll be just the private.
The books that are indexed are going to be everything you could ever think of as a big name, but also not just new books. We've gone back some of our books go back to the one I think we just did recently was from the 1930s, but most of them are since the 1970 onwards. But we've got books from the 40s, 50s, and 60s that we've indexed as well. If a book's popular or known by enough members, then we'll index it. But the other big thing, actually, that I should mention that we added was that members can also use our indexing tools to index their own books. So that way, a lot of the more obscure books and the older books have been indexed by the members themselves. They own the book. They want the recipes in their searches. So they have used our data entry tools that our professional indexers use, and they index the books themselves. And about a third of the books on the site have been indexed by members.
Wow, that's really interesting. I have a question for Jenny, and it's about recipe titles, because I'm thinking that, if you're managing indexers, just figuring out like recipe titles are something that are very important in print indexes, but they don't always translate to what is actually, what the dish is all about. And it's also a challenge for authors to figure out how to name our recipes. So I wanted to know, Jenny, do you have advice or thoughts or things to keep in mind as people are writing books that makes, say, a cookbook reader's job easier?
A lot of the books are really they do well with that, with the recipe titles. It usually reflects what's in the recipe. The cute thing seems to be making weird titles. I think it was Molly Baz, her last book. I love her. I love her recipes, but there's some weird titles in there. And that's the only thing I didn't like. I said, I will tolerate that because I love her and her recipes are good. But, it's just like, okay, can we just go back to English?
Right. It's not representative. The title might not be representative of what's in the dish.
We use the title that's in the book. We have to use the title in the book, of course. But they're not too far off. But there's some really sizzled crick cracks. That's a recipe for a bark. Seasored. Yeah. I mean, I love her. And I guess it's appealing to maybe a younger demographic. But some of these are just like, Brock and grains and so period, much period, mit period. I do get it, but those kind of bother me a tinge bit. But as long as the recipe's good, I really can't complain too much.
The other titles I've found recently are frustrating are the ones that literally just are 3 words of the ingredients with nothing else. So it'll be something like strawberries, watercress, cheese, and that's it. It's literally just those 3 words with commas in between, and they have no other explanation. Or books where, say, the whole book is ice cream, each recipe is just strawberry, chocolate, rum and raisin, or whatever.
I hadn't thought of that. Right. Yeah. You want strawberry ice cream. So
we then have to add it. We have to add ice cream afterwards in brackets after each recipe title, because if someone's doing a search and they just see strawberries, they're going to think, what's that? Even though we've added category tags, so that does make it, easier. Right. So we would have an ice cream. But that type of thing where they're only thinking in the context of their book, their page, and they're not thinking of the bigger picture of somebody having a cookbook collection. So it was a sort of a chefy thing for a while as well, where chefs.
Yeah, it's a restaurant menu.
Restaurant menus have been doing it too, where they literally just list 2 or 3 ingredients and nothing else about explaining what the dish is. So it went into cookbooks as well, but I haven't seen that so much recently.
Your indexers need to have a understanding of food to know how to apply the tags so that your community of users can find what they're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. And they all do. We wouldn't have somebody being a professional. And even the members as well. Actually, when I said about the member indexing, we actually do have somebody on our staff who proofreads everything that member indexes do, because it's really important that the quality of the member indexing is exactly the same as the professional indexing. Right. So that those type of things of just making sure that the right tags have been added, vegan and vegetarian, that they've been applied to something which doesn't have honey or anchovies or the ingredients which people seem to forget shouldn't be in a vegan or vegetarian, those type of things.
Right.
It's a huge undertaking that we've taken on, and we have members saying to us, "You can never close down. You never ever."
I was wondering.
Right.
We won't. But it is that thing that you just become so dependent on it. And I get emails all the time from people saying, "I look at your site every day, and it's essential to me for finding what I'm going to cook for dinner, because I know that I can just say, I want to cook X, X, and X, and I put it in, and I get a whole list of recipes."
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Everything Cookbooks, but it does take resources to make it happen. We'd like to invite you, our loyal listeners, to help us keep the lights on. To support the show, go to everythingcookbooks.com/support. There you can find links for any upcoming insider events where we go even further behind the scenes of the cookbook publishing world. You can also leave us a review, order books through our affiliate page, check out our awesome merch like t-shirts, sweatshirts, or you can even just buy us a round of coffee. Every little bit helps keep the show going. Thanks for listening.
As a user, I think I probably dragged my heels a little bit when I first became a member. I was like, I'm really going to sit here and put all these books in. And then, I did it in 1 or 2 goes. And then it's just a matter of you get a new book and you're like, oh, right. I have a little spot where I put them before they get shelved. And it doesn't take any time at all. And it is incredibly useful for that. But in addition to the indexing, and maybe, Jenny, this is where you could help us, but you also do a number of other things on the site. You have a blog and you review cookbooks and you write best of lists. So we're sort of curious how many books you review, because obviously you're not reviewing every book that you add to the site, and how often do these happen, and what's that whole process?
we do monthly cookbook reviews. And if I get the book, I try to provide a blurb that like one of our members will, take a look at, and I'll say, this is a must have, and I'm sorry, sometimes I use must have too much, but there are a lot of must have books for me at least. I do that. I do reviews of we do reviews and giveaways. We do our best stuff lists and things like that. But again, you're right. You can't review every single thing that comes in. So what I do is after all of these years, and Jane can relate, what's going to be appealing to our members. 5,000 keto recipes for your air fryer might not be one I would review because we don't, some members might like that, but not the majority of them. So we have to, we know what's going to be popular out there and what people want to hear about. If I find a book or, a couple of books that I know people aren't aware of, that are from Ireland or, some other country, even Singapore here lately, I try to do a post about those, and like Kitchen Arts and Letters will stock them and things like that. So
you're scouring, looking for new, when I say new books for EYB, it's not necessarily new releases. A new book is just something you want to add to your library. You're just sort of keeping your eyes open, feelers out.
Every month or every week now I update my 2024 preview list, which has hundreds and hundreds of books by month and where they're coming out at, like UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I search that myself, Amazon first, and then, UK, and then the different other countries like Mighty Ape and that type of thing. Yeah, so I add all the books I can.
Yeah, Jenny has a list of all the cookbook publishers around the world, and she's looking at their websites as well, looking to see what they've got coming up. So we're not just relying on the Amazon sites or whatever. We're trying to also find, books that members wouldn't come across any other way, particularly, just interesting topics or, subjects that we know that, might be something they haven't ever seen before. We don't really need another air fryer book at the moment.
Well, and I'm wondering too, are there certain publishers that always kind of rise to the surface, or certain publishers that you always have on sort of your list of I have to check out what they're doing? Or is it sort of spread across the board?
I'll answer that first, Jane, if you want to jump in then. We have a number of publishers that they reach out, they provide me everything. Hardy Grant, Quadrille, Ten Speak, Clarkson Potter, all those kind, Artisan, Abrams, the Canadian Appetite for Random House, all those, I check their sites. They reach out to me. They provide me, the PDFs and send copies of the books, when I request them, and those are the major ones. I probably forgot a ton of them, but there's probably 20, 25 go-to publishers that I try to put everything. I get everything from them. And then there's the self-published. There's some great self-published books. I'll find those and put those on. And smaller publishers that are coming on board for things too. I check out their sites because there's some great things happening, like Blasta Books and that 9 Row in Ireland. They have some great titles coming out or have come out. I try to keep on top of what's happening.
Wow.
Yeah, we also try and keep in touch with all of the cookbook awards around the world, the different countries, what they're doing, because the long list and the short list can be really interesting for us of finding books that we wouldn't necessarily come across. As Jenny says about self-published books, they can quite often appear in cookbook award lists. And so we find out about them that way. So we always publicize those cookbook awards on our blog, and they're really popular with our members, finding out what books have been nominated and what books end up winning. Of course, we've just been in cookbook awards season here with James Beard Awards just recently. And
Right. Do authors ever reach out to you directly and say, hey, I have a new book, it just came out, or I have a book that I didn't see on your site?
Yes, a lot. Yeah, I'll get emails all the time. Authors who have used us before, and the new authors I've heard about, send it to information at Eat Your Books, and we would like you to cover our book, and then Jane will copy me and say, Jenny does the reviews, and she'll get back to you. And I try to accommodate everyone. You may not get a big, huge review if it's something that may not appeal to a ton of our members, but it's going to be on the cookbook review. It may be mentioned. If I think it's a great book, then I may do something separately. But I try not to say no to anyone unless it's something really obscure like pig ear cookbooks or something. I can't think of something right
That
now.
would be
but
very niche. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You might still index it, but you're probably not going to review it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
never going to index that. I don't think.
Well, Jenny, I wanted to ask too, just before you know it, it's going to be fall cookbook season, and I know that is such a big time for
My favorite time of year.
It's your
Yeah.
favorite time of year, so I want to know, like, you're probably already seeing the books that are going to be, on shelves this fall. Like, are anything like, are you seeing trends that you're excited about, or titles that you're really looking forward to seeing? What's on your radar?
Well, I'm excited about Jane too. We love baking books, and there's so many great baking books. I love, ethnic, different cultures baking books. Something I don't have. There's so many great ones coming out, like Bodega Bakes and Desi Bakes. It's she did Milk and Cardamom. She has a baking book out. What I'm finding trend wise, and then I have my list is too long, but I can give you a couple more names.
Sure.
But it's the TikTok influencers are getting cookbooks. Now,
sure.
some of them, I'm not being harsh. Some of them are great, and some of them are for TikTok. So that's a big thing. If you have a lot of followers on TikTok, you're going to get a cookbook. And then there's other people that have blogs and who do great work that may never get a cookbook deal, and that's kind of sad, But that seems to be it's the air fryers now, and for a while it was the keto books, and then it was that type of thing. But air fryers are big right now, I think. Everybody's got one, wants one, or has one.
I don't have one. It's a counter space thing. I'm like, I don't know where I'd put it.
I have one that's a part of my countertop oven, but I've never used it, sadly. It's just,
oh, really? I mean, I know people love it when they use it all the time. Yeah. Yeah. But
I gotta take the stuff out I have stored, like napkins and special saucers.
Do you have a sense of the overall health of the cookbook industry? How are we doing?
I don't think it's suffering at all. I just think there's so many. I mean, there's so many cookbooks, and so many of them are fantastic. Maybe there are some similar recipes that have been in other books, but there's so many other parts of the book. There are so many other recipes that aren't something we've seen before, that's done in a different way or whatever. If you look at my preview list, I can send you a link later. I mean, there's, oh my God, how many are on there, Jane?
Hundreds and hundreds.
Wow.
I mean,
we'll put it in the show notes. I would love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite amazing when you think how many thousands of books come out every year. That can still be so many great books that are adding a new voice about something, and so much of it, certainly for us, for Jenny and I think for our members as well, is that author voice. When someone's got a unique perspective and can tell interesting stories, and has something new to add. There's just so many of those, and every year we say, oh, this was a great year, this was such a great year for cookbooks, and then the next year it's the same, it's another great year for cookbooks. I mean, we really are blown away how many great books. I mean, there's a lot of books which we'd be quite happy not to have to see, but there's so many great cookbooks coming out every year.
That's really good point. I was just thinking, Molly and I talked with Matt from Kitchen Arts and Letters about the cookbooks that he's looking for, because if you want a cookbook specific shop, they're going to be able to have so many niche books that maybe wouldn't fit on the shelves of a Barnes and Noble and whatnot. And I remember him saying that there was a Portuguese baking book that came out years ago that I think was out of print, but it was like, it was a really good seller for his shop. And he just wished there was more books like that. But it sounds like, Jenny, this fall, this might be, Kitchen Arts and Letters big branching out into baking from various parts of the world, which could be exciting.
Yeah,
maybe not Portuguese baking. I don't know. Maybe we still need that. But yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of Asian baking books have been coming out recently. Really interesting. Yeah, Jenny, what else do you think you've seen recently that may be very, very new and different?
Yeah, the Asian finally. I think is it Christina Cho who won for her milk? Yeah. I think. Well, I mean, I know there were others before her, but I think she kicked the door open. Now, that's that Settle Asian Baking Group that's got how many ever millions of members. Kate Cat, her books are fantastic. Now they have the Bodega Bites and the Chicano Bakes, and there's just I love those. I love stuff that I would not necessarily see before. The Philippine book. Oh, what's her name?
Mayuma.
Yes. As she won the Emerging Voice. Just fantastic. Something unique and different. I do have one little funny thing I like to add. There are books that I think, no way. No way. I don't want it. I don't want to look at it. I'm not going to promote it. I mean, not because of anything. It's just like seeing some of the stuff that they do on the social media. And then I get the book. Dang it. I fall in love with it. And
I love it.
Benny Blanco, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry, you're open wide. I thought it was gonna stink. I love it.
Oh my gosh.
Some bizarre things in there, like what was Ed Sheeran's Rolex he fries or something, but a lot of the recipes are just
Wow.
really, fantastic. So
That's great.
anyway,
So
that was a funny thing.
we have to ask you both. I mean, I'm so excited talking to you, and you bring so much enthusiasm for the industry. And after doing this for so many years, how do you stay inspired and excited about cookbooks that are both your work
The cocktail
and your
book from Fame
pastime?
Pirates.
Yeah.
Liquor.
It's just
Liquor.
That's a great
I will
answer.
never get tired of cookbooks.
But really, I
never-
mean,
No, me neither. I mean, it is a little bit of certainly it was for me was a passion project. It was something I really, was always the thing that I love was cookbooks. And so, that's never waned. I still feel the same. I get a new book coming through and I'm always excited, to see what it contains. And yeah, I mean, I still feel really excited by new books and seeing what they, how they're different.
it's
Yeah.
great.
The last thing, is there a favorite, like a book that you've been cooking from a lot this year?
What about you, Jenny? What do you think has been your?
Unfortunately, I've been sick for a while, the last couple
Oh.
of years.
So
And
sorry.
I've been trying new recipes, but not like I used to. I've been, I'll find a new recipe or two from a book and I'll make them. But I love Recipe 10 Eats. I think she's fantastic, and she has another book coming out. And this is not like restaurant food or anything that's going to be. You're going to go anywhere and you're going to find one of like say she does sweet and sour chicken, but her recipe is just so dang good. I mean. And I've heard that from so many people, and she's so popular. You can see why. But I love Amy Thielen's books because it's Midwest. That's a kind of
Yes.
I'm kind of hampered a little bit. My husband doesn't eat seafood or a lot of vegetables or fruit, and I'm not going to cook 2 meals, especially right now.
Right.
So I like the more of the simpler things. Yasmin book that she's put out.
Yasmin Farr.
Yeah, there's a lot of recipes in there I have marked because they seem simple and they will appeal to the whole family.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
we have a cookbook club on Facebook where we cook through 1 or 2 books each month. So I tend to try and cook from those books in that month for new recipes. And one that I've absolutely loved this year is B. Wilson, The Secret of Cooking.
Yes.
Oh my God, it's just an amazing book. I've cooked so
Amazing.
many things from it. I love her writing. Her voice is just, you just love her. And she's just so authoritative, but without being bossy. She just gives you so many unique. I just love that book, and I've been cooking a lot from that. Yeah, that's probably my favorite book this year so far.
Yeah, Molly and I had a great conversation with Bea about how she wrote it, and you really do. I don't know, Molly. It's a special book. It really stands
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you wouldn't think so. You would think, oh, just another book about tips and techniques. Oh, yeah, we've had plenty
Right.
of those. But actually, it's just such a great book. I mean, she's British, so maybe she's not so well known in the States, but I really hope it does break through. I mean, certainly we got some good people cooking from it through the Cookbook Club, but I hope it does break through here because it really is a great book. It's one of those books that you can imagine is just really going to last through the ages. I hope.
I think so, because it really does have a voice. And I think that's something that, we talk time and time. And we've mentioned earlier in this conversation about just the voice in a cookbook and how it's probably more important than it ever has been. And that book, the voice from the first page and you just want to stay with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just love the range of, we're talking about everything from TikTok stars to literary cookbook writers. And it's just wonderful that there's sort of spots for all these books.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lots of genres, cookbook genres.
Yeah. The books coming up in the fall, one I'm really looking forward to is Ottolenghi's Comfort, because I love Ottolenghi's books. And this one said, I think I haven't cooked so much from the last couple, the test kitchen books that he's done, but this one being comfort food, I'm really looking forward to seeing what he and his team are doing with that. When people say, oh, I like to just wing it when I'm cooking, I don't really like following recipes. For me, I always give the example of I could never come up with the combinations that Ottolenghi does in his recipes, and that's one of the reasons why I love cookbooks and the recipes that I follow, because they come up with ideas and combinations I really just couldn't do on my own. I mean, you both are much more inventive. You write cookbooks, but I'm not like that. I'm not a very inventive cook. I love having someone else do the inventions for me. And so that's a book I'm really looking forward to. And then there's another British writer, Nigel Slater, who I love. Again, a very authoritative, a great voice, author's voice. And he's got a new book coming out this fall called 1,000 Feasts. And I'm looking forward to that. I own all of his cookbooks from his very first one.
Wow.
So I'm looking forward to that one.
Right. There's so much to look forward to this fall. So we'll get through the summer heat. And before you know it, people will be getting nice and cozy and making comfort food Ottolenghi style. And what could be better? Right?
And if people, are really unsure what they might be interested in, take a look at Jenny's list, because she really does the digging. She finds all those books when they're coming out, and you can look through and just say, oh yeah, that's somebody I want to check out. And you can have a look. And if any of your listeners want to actually join Eat Your Books, we're really happy to give a 1-month free trial to anybody that would like to try it out. They can use a voucher code, which I've set up, which is ECB24. So that's specifically for listeners of your podcast. And they can just do a 1-month free trial of the premium membership and see if it's, something they might find useful. And if you own more than a few cookbooks, hopefully you will.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's a great idea.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure a lot of listeners will take you up on it. We will put that and your best of lists and ways to find you in the show notes. But we really thank you both for not only for spending the time today, but doing what you do. It's an incredible service to our cookbook community.
Thank you. Well, thanks for what you do as well. I mean, we need more people out there finding out about more cookbooks.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more episodes and ways to contact us, go to our website, everythingcookbooks.com. The show is available wherever you get your audio, and if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. It really helps. Any book mentioned on the show can be found on our affiliate page at bookshop.org. And thanks, as always, to our editor, Abby Circatella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.